Good afternoon. This is Sandy Kane from Real Sourcing Network, and I want to welcome you to our latest webinar, where we're going to be talking about what to look for in print sourcing software. Let me get started by introducing our speakers for today. Now, what's happened to my? There it is. As I said, I'm Sandy Kane. I'm the CEO of Real Sourcing Network, and joining me today is Paul Towsey from Australia, who is the Director of Marketing Sales and Director of Marketing Services for the Victorian Government in Australia. Let me spend about a few seconds introducing myself, and then I'll have Paul do the same. As the CEO of Real Sourcing Network, we are a company that provides print e-sourcing software to our clients in two forms. We provide a license to those companies that would like to use our software called SourceIt to do their own print procurement. And as an alternative, we offer a buying service where our clients hire us to use the software for them to take over the responsibility for their buying. So our side of our discussion today is to talk about e-sourcing print software and its benefits and values. Obviously, we have a bias specifically to SourceIt, but that's not what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about print e-sourcing in general. Paul, on the other hand, is someone who has used e-sourcing software extensively, and specifically SourceIt. And I'll allow Paul to do a brief introduction, if you would, Paul.
Thank you, Sandy. I've been involved in the print and marketing related services industry all my working life, and that's more years than I care to admit. But the last 20 years, it's been focused on managed services and supply chain management. During this time, it's fair to say that technology has played a significant role in how I go about things to deliver the best outcomes and the value from the spend category. Today, I'll share with you some of my experiences and learnings from using sourcing software. In my current role, which I've held for the last 8 years, I'm responsible for managing the Victorian Government print and related services contract. To give you a little bit of perspective of what this involves, let me share with you just a few relevant numbers and the scope of the services. The numbers are, there are 9 primary state departments. There are an additional 25 agencies. We manage a supply chain of 300 plus suppliers. We source and manage over 10,000 individual jobs per year. And since 2011, we've had a 45% growth in the spend that we're capturing. In terms of the scope of the services, these include offset printing, digital, both small and large format, branded merchandise, outdoor, warehousing and distribution, mailing services, electronic direct mail, and e-publishing. At this point, Sandy, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thanks, Paul. We're going to basically cover two things today. We're going to talk a little bit about the benefits that are provided by print sourcing software. And then we're going to go into what are the attributes and capabilities that you should be looking for when evaluating your decision to use a specific print sourcing software. I should say, by the way, that there are all kinds of sourcing software packages that you can get. We are specifically talking about those things that are geared specifically to print sourcing software, as opposed to just a generic software for procurement. And that's important because some of the aspects of what we're talking about are very key relating to print as we go forward. So first, let's talk about those benefits. As we look at this, we put a list here together of some of the key things that you would find that are the benefits of using print sourcing software. There are others, but these are probably the 5 most important. Not necessarily in order of importance, but let me cover them the way they are here on the chart. First, you're going to be looking for cost savings. Because of the way the sourcing software should be done, you should be able to achieve significant cost savings over what you're doing have been doing in the past. By using a print sourcing software system, you will also see improved efficiency and productivity, along those lines. You'll also get significant improvement in the visibility of what you're spending as a client, because of the extensive reporting capability that exists by having the software. I will tell you that when we talk to a potential client and we ask the question of how much are they spending for print, most of these potential clients don't know, because they're not using a print sourcing software solution, and therefore it's not visible to them on an ongoing basis. But with the software, that becomes clear and obvious on a real-time basis. It also gives you the ability to manage both the suppliers and their performance through the software, with an ability to understand what's going on with them that typically doesn't exist without the software. And last but not least is the ability to have the software manage contract and regulatory compliance that the clients have, to use to keep everything in order on that basis. And the software, through the controls that are built into the software, helps to make that happen. Paul, anything you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, look, I think without some kind of a platform, it's very hard to capture your spend. If you can't get your hands around what it is, it's pretty challenging, and I think most people have experienced that. And all of the variables that you just described, certainly we've experienced that using the Sourceit software, but I've used other softwares in the past, and obviously, I believe Sourceit's the best one that I've used, but you do need some kind of a platform to be able to manage, these processes. Print tends to be very, very broad, diversified, high activity level, and unless you record what it is that you're going to the market for and who with, and be able to report on that, you're flying blind to a large extent.
I agree. All right. So now that we know the benefits of using it, let's talk in some detail about the kind of capabilities that need to exist in a good print sourcing software. These are the things that you should be looking for as you make a decision of not only starting to use some kind of print sourcing software, but to select the best one for your needs. And we've got 8 specific things listed here, and we're going to go through each one of them one at a time, starting with the broad functionality at number 1. What we're talking about here is, you want to be able to have a system that provides first for the buying of a wide range of printed materials and marketing services. If it's software that is only allowing for a small amount of different types of printing capability or marketing services, it's not going to meet your needs, and most importantly, your people are not going to really embrace it and start to use it as effectively as that needs to be done. You also need to be able to have support for various types of purchases. On the one hand, you want to be able to have it work with print-on-demand purchases, where you're going to do competitive bidding and give out an award for a specific job. You'd also want it to have catalog-based or contract purchases, where you've negotiated a price for a given list of products that people can acquire through the software without having to go through a bidding process, because you've already completed that. So a good software system has the capability to do both of these things. It also, as a part of its functionality, should be able to analyze prior purchases that are in the system and look at prospective solutions going forward to make sure that what you're looking for that next job is being done effectively. Paul?
Yeah, look, I think I agree with everything you said. The only thing that I would add is that is to have all that functionality, but also in a manner that's easy to use. Some systems give you all of that, but they're quite clunky and a lot of screens to go in and out of. So unless you're a frequent user, it becomes rather challenging to use. So I would add everything that you said, but it has to be easy to use, because otherwise users are going to get frustrated and refrain to use it, and then it becomes limited to just super users.
Right, and we'll talk about the ease of use requirement in a little bit, but I absolutely agree with that, Paul. So next, you want to make sure that the software has the ability to have a really solid, strong bid management capability. You want to make certain that it's easy to enter the product or service specifications for a given job with pre-configured product types that are specific to your organization, as well as having drop-down menus so things can be selected like brands or types of paper or colors or variations on coding at number of pages, etc. And the better you use of, the better the software uses drop-down menus instead of just places where the user has to fill in all the answers, makes it more usable and more guaranteed that the users will actually use the software. You also want to have a system where it is easy to transmit the RFQs to the vendors and easy for the vendors to submit bids. People who are not used to using a software system for print purchases typically do all this through emails and phone calls, etc. And the ability to manage and track all of that through the various emails becomes very cumbersome. Whereas within a software system, if it's done well, all of that communication is done both directions, from the client to the vendors and the vendors back to the client, to get those bids done and keep track of all the systems as it's going. Paul?
Yeah, what I'd like to add to that is that the more intuitive the system is, the better. Again, it just makes the user experience more pleasant and more efficient. And certainly our experience with SourceIt is that it is very intuitive. So as you start to fill in the specifications, it basically, the menu just advances to the next logical options, which makes, you know, the first time that you enter the spec for a job quite easy. And then of course after that you can just basically use that as a template, and away you go. I will add too that again, to make things easier for the experience and quicker, that you want to try and capture as much of your activities in rate cards and contracted business and things that are already pre-negotiated. And that's something that we're able to do to a fairly high degree, which again allows us to pump out more quotes and manage more jobs on a daily basis with less staff.
When Paul mentioned intuitive, it reminded me of something that's important that helps with the ability to be able to easily get all of this work done. For example, if you have a system where you have said that you want to get a quote for a brochure and you describe the number of pages, depending on the number of pages, it will specifically within the system tell you what kind of binding capability exists. So obviously, if you had a brochure that was only 4 pages long, you're not going to have the ability to select perfect binding to get it done because it wouldn't work. And the software, if it's any good, knows that and helps direct you in the right direction to get that to work. Moving ahead to number 3. I'm sorry, Paul, you want to add something?
Sandy, in terms of the depth of the intuition, certainly in Australia we have about 400 different paper types, and I'm sure in the States you've got many more than that. And the database is in there, so we can actually go and select the exact paper type that we're looking for in the grammages that paper is available in, and that's a very, very practical feature.
Great. Okay, number 3, ease of implementation and management of the system. It's critical if you want to have software that will be not only easy to use, but easy to maintain and get started with, the keys to implementation and management are critical. On the implementation side, you need to be able to simply understand what information is required to begin using the system and how much is going to be involved in both time and effort to be able to get the initial setup done so that it can start to be used by the people within the company. And then on an ongoing basis, you need to deal with the question of adding and removing suppliers and users, and how easy is that to do it, and also managing user access and permissions. A good software system allows for the administrator of the system to be able to assign specific permissions and access to users that will vary depending on who they are and what limits and capabilities you want them to have within the system. Also, if you want to add new product types over time, you want to have it so that it's easy to do and can be done effectively going forward. Paul?
Yeah, certainly the implementation for us was quite easy. I mean, you've got templated items, obviously, so you build your templates and that's done. A lot of products in print change from order to order, and the specs change. So you build them on the fly as you send requests out. But certainly one of the aspects that I've really enjoyed in SourceIt is the supply management side. Being a government contract, we're quite unique in that the government likes it when we share the wealth and engage with a lot of suppliers. A lot of times in the private sector, that's not the case, and you wouldn't have such a large supply chain as what we have. But managing the amount of suppliers that I've mentioned, this is a great feature for us. You can add suppliers, you can classify them by the type of suppliers that they are, the products, social suppliers, regional suppliers. There's so many ways that we can cut and dice them, which then really helps us when we go to the market. We're targeting the right suppliers. We don't need to have 12 of them. We just have 3 to 5 typically, but they're the right suppliers that have been pre-qualified, that are well credentialed to bid on a particular job. So it makes us very efficient. And what it does too is it doesn't wear out your supply chain by having them quote, on a lot of things that, they're probably not going to win. So it means that their conversion rate as a result also benefits, which makes for a much healthier supply chain.
Great. Okay, number 4, reporting capability. Once you're just making the decision to start using a print sourcing software, you clearly understand that all of your work is now going to be contained within the software. So it's critical that that software has the capability of providing reporting that is easy to get and with a full list of capability, so that you have a good understanding of all of that data that is built into the system, because all the work is being done there. So a good software system is going to have an extensive list of standard reports covering, everything that can be tracked, whether it's product types or suppliers or supplier classification, supplier locations, organizational units, obviously savings on an ongoing basis, whether, what was the savings for last month, last quarter, last year, etc. All of those should be things that are accessible through standard reports, where all you've got to do is click on the button and look at that reports. At the same time, it's important to have within the software the ability to easily create custom reports that are geared to the specific needs of your company without having to try to manipulate things around the data every time you want to do something. In addition, those reports should be able to be done in such a way that they can be scheduled, so that at the beginning of every month, you can see what happened last month and have it automatically generated and sent to you as an email, so you don't even have to go into the systems to see the data. All of that capability is critical to be part of the system, so that it doesn't have to be generated every time that you need to create a report just to do something. It ought to be built in, and even on those reports that you create, they are saved within the system, so the next time you want to see that same report, you just have to click on it. Paul?
Yeah, that's probably my favorite feature of SourceIt. As you said, it is so easy to generate customized reports, and of course, we capture every single detail relating to every job, from a customer perspective, the specs, the suppliers. It's all there, and so the field that we have to choose from to be able to generate customized reports is extensive, date ranges. It's so easy to use, and as you said, you can schedule them, you can template them for the customer to make it easy. It's a fantastic feature, and one that I still on a regular basis to generate customized reports when I want to know a bit more insight about certain things. And as I said, I think it's probably my favorite feature.
Great. Okay. We talked a little bit about this in terms of ease of use, etc. But what's critical to think of is that the interface, the ability to use this system needs to be intuitive and obvious to the user. The more difficult the software is, the less likely it is that you're going to get people to use it and like it. So it's got to be easy to use, or it's just simply not going to be used. And it needs to be clear, uncluttered, provide real intuitive navigation so that you get the work done and you get the data into the system easily and quickly to get the results back that you want. And it needs to be done in such a way that users, without an awful lot of training, they need a little bit, but without an awful lot of training, they will be proficient quickly in the system. I need to pause here and tell you a story that I think is apropos to this and is so typical of the way this is done. We have a client which is in the Northeast, which is a large private university that we had join us as a client. And I remember going out to meet with the woman who was going to be the one who was doing most of the print buying, and to show her the brief amount of training that we did that was necessary to be able to get her going on the system. And when we sat down in her cubicle where she had her offices, the two walls of her cubicle and her desk were totally covered with papers and Post-it notes, and you could literally not see an empty space anywhere in that area. About 4 months later, I was back at her desk, having a meeting just to kind of follow up and see how they were doing, and does she have any suggestions or questions about what was going on. And I felt like I was in a different place because her desk was spotless, and the only things that were on the wall of her cubicle were some pictures of her children. And I couldn't resist. So I said to her, what caused all this cleanup from where I was here 4 months ago? And she said, you guys did. Everything I used to have with all those papers scattered all over my office are now built into the system. So I have them all in an orderly fashion, and I'm just in love with this. And obviously I was thrilled, to have her say that. And I've told that story countless times because such an important aspect of people are going to use the system if they're comfortable using it. Paul, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, look, I agree. I've always believed that people are relatively lazy, and unless it's really easy, they're just not going to use the system. It can have all the cleverness in the world, but if it's not easy to use, people will not use it, especially when it's been introduced to people that are perhaps reticent to use it. It gives them a lot of excuses to say, oh, this is too hard. Certainly in our case, we have a lot of self-users across government. We have hundreds, in fact. And a lot of those people, we don't even have to, because there's just so many, we can't train everybody. So we're really dependent on having a system that's easy to learn, where there's a lot of self-help tools and so on and so forth. And we support that with the customer support team. But yeah, look, we've got a lot of people that just go right ahead and fly on their own, use the system. And yeah, so I agree with everything you said. And that's a good story, by the way.
It has to be. I've probably told it 50 times by now.
It's a good one.
Okay. you want to have a software where, if you're going to take all of the information about what you're doing in terms of print procurement and put it into a system, you need to have the confidence that it will be reliable in terms of performance and security, so that you know that your data is well protected and accessible to you on an ongoing basis. So that as you make a decision about which software system you want to use, you want to know that it has the right kind of and the best you can in terms of reliability and performance, in terms of the technology infrastructure. And clearly you want to be certain that security is up at the top of the list. So you need to look for, having this hosted on a major cloud software platform. And some examples you see on the bottom of the chart are, Microsoft Azure, which is what we use for SourceIt, Amazon or Google Cloud or anything like that as well. And it's critical, because if you can't feel comfortable that these things, that these platforms are the kinds of things that are holding on to your data and giving you the security you need, then by definition, you should not be sleeping well at night. It's an absolutely essential piece of this equation. Paul?
Yeah, look, certainly with the Victorian government, we manage a lot of content that is very confidential, relating to budgets and police matters and security. A lot of it is very time sensitive, in that it has to be timed with press conferences and things that you see in the media. So timing is everything, reliability is everything, security is everything. And we just could not use a solution that could not give us that 100% reliability. And certainly in our case too, the fact that it's hosted in Australia is another benefit from a security perspective. Governments tend to, these days, dislike when things are hosted offshore. So yeah, once again, complete agreement with everything you said.
Yeah, and in fact, that's important in that, we're in discussions now with a potential client who is in Canada, and they wanted to be sure that the instance of their software would be hosted in Canada as opposed to the U.S., and we could accommodate that. So as you're making decisions with regard to print sourcing software, you need to ask all the right questions to make sure that you're comfortable having it done the way you need to have it done. We had a question that was submitted about, how do we enable a connection or integration with ERP systems like Ariba and Jagger, et cetera. And, obviously it's a question that must have been asked by someone who saw this chart, because we would not be doing our job, without talking about this, because most clients at least want to be able to know that that integration is something that is possible. And more than possible, you want to make a decision for your software where it is easy to integrate with an ERP system. And basically, it can be done either one of two ways. Some systems have built into the system a connector, if you will, to specific ERP software. More frequent, however, is the fact that the software has the ability through open APIs to be able to integrate, the software with your APIs, with your ERP system, whether it's something like Ariba or Oracle or you name it. Most good print sourcing systems have the ability through APIs to be able to make those connections. One of the things that we find in our experience talking to clients is, although they are interested in making that integration possible, they usually want to start out working with the software in an independent fashion. And then once they get used to the use of the software, then do the integration, maybe 6 months or a year later. Paul, you had anything to add?
No, I don't have anything to add on that.
Okay. Last one. Customer support. anytime you're dealing with a software system where you're relying on the system to be able to do everything you need to make you do your job effectively, you need to make sure that the software system you're acquiring, you know, is being provided to you by a vendor to who fully understands that without solid, real customer support, the system is frankly useless. You need to be able to know that through the entire process, from implementation to ongoing use, there is support that is easily available, both in terms of the initial setup, user training, and that kind of setup and user training is not something that happens only at the beginning. You have new users that come into the system. You need to be able to have access to training them on an ongoing basis. Same with, you may do all the implementation things that are required, but over time you need to add additional users or additional suppliers or additional product types, and you need to be able to have the support necessary to make that happen. You also need to have access to solid technical support on a real-time basis. And in most cases, you will know that you can do that with quick response emails, whether it's 2 hours or 4 hour response time. And also sometimes you'll be able to have availability of phone support for certain hours of the day to be able to do that. But what's most important is that it needs to be real-time support that can give you answers to your questions, in a very professional manner. Paul?
Look, certainly the experience we've had here in Australia has been excellent. Very responsive, all the comments that you've made. And I would add that in terms of, it doesn't matter how good a system is, you can always make it better, as we all know. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed is the fact that the system continues to evolve, and certainly when we put requests through about further enhancements and improvements and tweaking, they're quite receptive, and that's something else that I find very encouraging about having adopted this system, because as good as it is, it just keeps getting better. So I think that's worth a mention.
Well, in my experience, any software system, and these are clearly true of these two as well, is that if the software system does not evolve and improve over time, then it's going to stagnate and become not as useful as it was on the day you started it. So that kind of thing is critical going forward. So having said that, that covers all the topics. So for some reason it's not switching. We get to Q&A. We just got another question that I'd be happy to answer. The question is, what percentage of savings are users reporting using a print sourcing solution, and are there factors that contribute to higher savings numbers? Our experience is that the users of our software, and I can't tell you that this is true for other print sourcing software, but the users of SourceIt have typically been looking at anywhere in the neighborhood of 14 to 22% savings on their work. I will tell you that savings calculation is done because our system does an automated 5-bid competitive bidding process. And the savings calculation is done by taking the winning bid and comparing it to the 4 losing bids. And the difference between them is that 14 to 22%. We have found that works consistently for most of our clients. I will also tell you that what we have had experience with is we find that there are a lot of clients, both large companies and small, who have not used extensively competitive bidding in the past. Where that has been the case, what happens typically is a company will use a set of suppliers that they have been using for years. They may be very good, they may be doing the best job for them, etc., but they're not necessarily getting the best competitive price they can get. And what we have done on some occasions is looked at a market basket of historical spend that a client has had and then run them through our software to see what pricing we would have gotten if we had done those same things. As compared to the example I gave you of the 14 to 22%, companies that have not done competitive bidding in the past, our experience is that savings is more like 30 to 50%. The problem is that's very difficult to manage or measure on an ongoing basis because, as we all know, no two print jobs are ever exactly the same. So if you had a brochure you printed 6 months ago, and I'm going to print another brochure today, it's hard to compare the two because the number of pages may have changed, the paper may have changed, it may go from 2-color to 4-color, et cetera, et cetera. So it's hard to make a comparison like that. But looking at historical spend does give you a good indication of that on a one-time basis. Is this what you could be expecting to save going forward? I hope that answers that question. If there are any other questions that anybody wants to put into the system, we'll wait a minute or so before we sign off to see if there are any.
Sandy, can I add to
that?
Sandy, can I add something
Please do.
to?
Please do.
I think in answering that, you have to look at the maturity of the customer, of the organization in terms of engaging the market to get best value. So I agree with the percentages that you've given, especially in an environment where the category has not been contested that well in the past. As a customer becomes more mature, obviously those hard cost savings, those percentages become less realistic. But it's fantastic to establish a competitive platform where you're buying well. But I think ongoing, the contestable aspect of engaging the market is very significant because you can have the confidence knowing that the price that you're paying is the right price, and that big ticket item that you might not have time to go to the market, which most customers fall into that trap where they're buying really well many times, but they're in a hurry, they're short on time. Oops, you got a $50,000 job to source, and that's the one that you don't have a process for, and that's the one you end up paying a premium. So I think that's important to consider. But look, I think for the government, they want to make sure that they're not just getting the lowest cost, but the best value, and working through us and through the system. They know that everything that is being sourced through us, they're paying the right price. And I think for a more mature client, that's probably what's more important.
I think that's true. So in closing, I just want to say thank you so much for your participation. I hope this was informative. If you have any interest in looking with any questions specifically about not just print e-sourcing software, but us, RSN, and SourceIt, you can contact Sarah Scudder, whose email and phone number is showing on the screen. I would also encourage you to go to our website, and on a regular basis, if you check on events, you'll see when our future webinars are going to be scheduled, as whether other things that may or may not be in your area when we have events. We'd love to have you at some of those things. So again, thank you for your participation. Paul, thank you so much for your help with this. And with that, we will sign off. Thanks a lot.